I'm Maya, and I'm 22 years old. I stood in our backyard watching my mother throw my college graduation gift into the fire pit. The flames ate through the envelope while she screamed that I was worthless, that my business degree meant nothing. My older brother Ethan smirked from the porch, his medical school acceptance letter still pinned to the refrigerator like a trophy. Mom didn't know what was really in that envelope. Nobody did. The fire crackled, consuming what she thought was just another participation certificate from her disappointing daughter. But I'd already photographed everything inside. The letter from Goldman Enterprises. The job offer. The salary that would make her monthly income look like pocket change. I watched the ashes float away and smiled. She'd just burned a copy while the real offer sat safely in my apartment. Let me back up and explain how we got here. Growing up in the Chen household meant understanding your place. Ethan was the golden child, destined for greatness since he could hold a pencil. I was the backup plan, the one who existed to make him look better. Every parent-teacher conference, every family dinner, every holiday gathering followed the same script. Ethan's achievements took center stage while mine got a polite nod before conversation shifted back to him. When he won the science fair, we celebrated for a week. When I got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, Mom said it was nice but reminded me that Ethan had gotten into an Ivy League school. The comparison never ended. I learned early that fighting for attention was pointless. Instead, I focused on building something they couldn't see. While Ethan studied medicine with family funding and constant praise, I worked 3 part-time jobs and studied business at night. My college years were lonely but productive. I couldn't afford the dorm, so I rented a tiny studio apartment 40 minutes from campus. While other students partied and made lifelong friends, I worked at a coffee shop from 5 to 9 in the morning, attended classes until 3, then worked retail until closing. Weekends meant catering gigs and online freelancing. Mom never asked how I paid for anything. She assumed my partial scholarship covered everything, never bothering to check. The truth was, I'd built a small digital marketing business on the side, helping local shops with their social media. It started with one bakery, then a bookstore, then a chain of 3 restaurants. By junior year, I was managing 12 clients and earning more than my retail job paid. But I never told anyone. Not my roommate-less apartment walls, and definitely not my family. Senior year changed everything. Professor Williams taught advanced corporate strategy, and she actually saw me. Not as Ethan's sister or the quiet girl in the back. She saw potential. After class one day, she asked about my career goals. I told her about my marketing clients, expecting the usual advice about getting a real job. Instead, her eyes lit up. She connected me with Goldman Enterprises, a major marketing firm looking for fresh talent. They wanted someone who understood both theory and practical application, someone who'd actually run campaigns, not just studied them. The interview process was intense. 3 rounds, including a presentation to senior partners. I prepared like my life depended on it, because it did. When they called with the offer, I was in my apartment eating ramen between shifts. Starting salary, $85,000. In my family, that was doctor money. I decided to wait until graduation to tell my family. I wanted to hand them the offer letter along with my diploma, proof that I'd made something of myself despite being ignored. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. I walked across that stage knowing I'd earned every single step. My parents came, though Mom complained about the parking and Dad spent most of the time on his phone. Ethan didn't come at all. He had a study group, apparently more important than his sister's graduation. After the ceremony, I invited them to dinner at my apartment. I'd cleaned for hours, prepared a nice meal, printed the offer letter on expensive paper. I imagined Mom's face when she realized I'd be earning more than Dad did after 30 years at the factory. I imagined her apology for every dismissive comment, every comparison to Ethan, every time she'd made me feel small. They arrived an hour late. Mom walked in, looked around my studio apartment, and wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something bad. She didn't compliment the dinner I'd spent my last grocery money preparing. She didn't congratulate me on graduating with honors. Instead, she asked when I'd get a real job and move back home to save money. I took a deep breath and pulled out the envelope. The Goldman Enterprises letterhead gleamed under my cheap apartment lighting. This was it. The moment everything would change. I handed it to her with shaking hands. She opened it, barely glanced at the contents, and laughed. Not a happy laugh. A cruel, dismissive sound that made my stomach drop. She said it was probably some entry-level position that would lead nowhere, that Ethan's path to becoming a surgeon was real success. Then she did something I'll never forget. Mom stood up, walked to my tiny kitchen, and grabbed the envelope. Before I could react, she headed toward the door. I followed her outside, confused and hurt, as she marched to our old fire pit in the backyard. Dad and I stood there watching as she pulled out a lighter. She said I needed to stop dreaming and face reality. That this job, whatever it was, wouldn't change the fact that I was ordinary while Ethan was exceptional. She said I was worthless compared to him, that I should stop trying to compete. Then she lit the corner of the paper. I watched my offer letter catch fire, curl, and turn to ash. The flames reflected in her eyes, and I saw no regret there. Only satisfaction that she'd put me back in my place. Dad said nothing. He never did. When the fire died down, Mom brushed off her hands and went back inside to finish dinner. I stood there staring at the ashes, and something inside me shifted. The old Maya, the one who craved her mother's approval, burned away with that paper. What rose from those ashes was someone new. Someone who understood that some people will never see your worth, no matter what you achieve. I walked back inside calmly. Mom was eating the dinner I'd prepared, complaining that the chicken was dry. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Professor Williams. She answered on the second ring. I told her what happened, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. She was quiet for a moment, then asked a question that changed everything. Did I still have the original offer letter? I did. It was in my folder of important documents, safe in my bedroom closet. Then she told me something I hadn't known. Goldman Enterprises had been so impressed with me, they'd flagged my file for accelerated advancement. Professor Williams explained that Goldman rarely did this for new graduates. They saw something special in my portfolio, especially my track record with actual clients. The senior partners wanted to fast-track me into a junior management position within 6 months if I proved myself. The starting salary of $85,000 was just the beginning. With performance bonuses and the management track, I could be earning 6 figures by year 2. She asked if I was still interested in accepting. I looked through the bathroom door at my mother, still eating my food, still treating my home like it was beneath her. I thought about all the years of being invisible, all the comparisons to Ethan, all the times my achievements were dismissed. Then I thought about what it would feel like to succeed beyond her wildest imagination while she remained oblivious. I told Professor Williams I'd accept the offer immediately. We'd play this my way now. I returned to the dinner table and acted like nothing had happened. Mom was telling Dad about Ethan's latest achievement, some award from his program. I nodded along, asked appropriate questions, played the role of supportive younger sister. When they finally left, Mom didn't hug me goodbye. She just reminded me to be realistic about my future and suggested I look into administrative assistant positions. I smiled and said I'd definitely look into office work. The moment their car pulled away, I called Goldman Enterprises and formally accepted the position. My start date was 3 weeks away. I spent those weeks preparing in secret. I gave notice at all my part-time jobs, telling my bosses I'd gotten an opportunity one couldn't refuse. I packed up my apartment quietly, arranging for movers on a weekday when my family wouldn't notice. I found a beautiful one-bedroom place near Goldman's downtown office, nothing extravagant but worlds better than my studio. My first day at Goldman Enterprises felt surreal. The office occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. My desk had a view of the city skyline. My new colleagues were brilliant, driven people who actually listened when I spoke. Nobody asked about my famous brother or made me feel like I was taking up space I hadn't earned. For the first time in my life, I was judged purely on my work. And my work was excellent. Within 2 weeks, I'd streamlined our social media reporting process, saving the team 6 hours per week. My supervisor, Claire, called me into her office. I worried I'd overstepped, but she was smiling. She told me the senior partners had noticed my initiative. They wanted me to sit in on client meetings, something usually reserved for employees with 6 months' experience. I was flying, and my family had no idea I'd even left the ground. I kept my new life completely separate from my family. When Mom called, I let it go to voicemail. When she did reach me, I kept conversations brief and vague. I told her I was working in an office downtown, doing marketing stuff. She didn't ask for details, too busy updating me on Ethan's research project. He was working on something impressive, apparently going to revolutionize cardiac care. I congratulated her and ended the call quickly. My coworkers became my new family. Claire took me under her wing, teaching me the unwritten rules of corporate success. James, another junior associate, became my friend and lunch buddy. We'd eat at the food trucks near the office, laughing about difficult clients and celebrating small victories. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. 3 months in, I landed my first major client solo. A restaurant chain looking to completely revamp their digital presence. The contract was worth $200,000 to Goldman. The restaurant project consumed my life in the best way. I worked 12-hour days, but unlike my college jobs, this work excited me. I was building something meaningful, using everything I'd learned. The client loved my ideas. We increased their social media engagement by 300% in the first month. Online reservations doubled. They were so happy, they extended the contract and referred us to 2 other companies. Claire called me into her office again. This time, 3 senior partners joined us. My heart pounded as they reviewed my work, their faces unreadable. Then the managing partner, Mr. Goldman himself, smiled. He said I was exactly the kind of talent they looked for. Creative, hardworking, and results-driven. Then he offered me the junior management position. 6 months early. My new salary would be $95,000, with performance bonuses that could push it over $100,000. I was 22 years old, and I'd be managing a team of 3. I accepted the promotion professionally, shook hands, and somehow made it back to my desk before the reality hit me. I was making more money than both my parents combined. More than Ethan would make as a resident doctor for years. And none of them knew. Part of me wanted to call Mom immediately, to prove her wrong, to hear her apologize. But a wiser part of me stayed quiet. I'd learned that some battles aren't worth fighting. Instead, I focused on being the best manager I could be. My team respected me because I'd done their jobs, understood their challenges, and always gave credit where it was due. We became the highest performing unit in the company. 6 months after my promotion, the senior partners called me in again. They wanted me to represent Goldman at an industry conference. The National Marketing Summit in Chicago. It was the biggest event of the year, where major companies scouted talent and partnerships were formed. The conference was incredible. 3 days of workshops, networking events, and presentations from industry leaders. I attended every session, taking notes, making connections, absorbing everything. On the second day, I was invited to a private dinner for rising professionals under 30. The room was full of brilliant people from major companies. I felt out of my depth until I started talking about my restaurant project. People were genuinely interested. One woman, Sarah Chen from a Fortune 500 company, asked for my business card. She said her company was looking for fresh perspectives on their marketing strategy. Would I be interested in consulting? I explained I worked for Goldman, but I could potentially do something through them. She smiled and said she'd be calling my boss. When I got back to my hotel room that night, I had 5 new LinkedIn connections from executives at major corporations. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Sarah Chen had already called. Goldman wanted me to lead the consultation project. The Fortune 500 project was massive. 6 months, multiple teams, and a contract worth over $1 million to Goldman. I was the lead strategist. At 23 years old, I was presenting to boardrooms full of executives older than my parents. And they listened to me. They implemented my suggestions. They saw results. My salary jumped to $120,000, plus a performance bonus of $30,000. I was officially making more money than I knew what to do with. I upgraded my apartment to a beautiful 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. I bought nice clothes, not designer brands, but quality pieces that made me feel confident. I started a savings account that grew faster than I'd ever imagined possible. And still, my family knew nothing. Mom's calls had become monthly check-ins where she'd ask if I was still working at that office job. I'd say yes, and she'd transition to Ethan's latest accomplishment. 1 year after graduation, Ethan completed his first year of medical school. Mom insisted on throwing him a celebration party at their house. She called me 3 days before, almost as an afterthought, and said I should come. I almost declined, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see them with my new eyes, from my new life. The party was exactly what I expected. Extended family, friends, everyone gathered to celebrate Ethan. A banner hung across the living room proclaiming him a future doctor. Mom had made his favorite foods, bought an expensive cake, invited everyone who mattered. I arrived in my new car, a sensible but nice sedan that I'd paid cash for. Mom didn't notice. She was too busy directing guests to the food table. I found Dad in the kitchen, and he gave me a brief hug. He asked how work was going. I said it was good. He nodded and returned to arranging plates. The party felt like watching a play I was no longer part of. Everyone asked Ethan about medical school, his future specialization, his research. When people remembered I existed, they'd ask what I was doing. Before I could answer, Mom would jump in with a vague comment about me working in an office downtown. Then she'd redirect conversation back to Ethan. I stood in the corner, eating cake, observing the family dynamics I'd escaped. Ethan's girlfriend, Amanda, was there. She was sweet, a nursing student who clearly adored him. She came over to talk to me, one of the few people who actually seemed interested in my life. I told her I worked in marketing. She asked what company, and I said Goldman Enterprises. Her eyes widened. She knew the name, had seen their campaigns. She asked how I liked it there, and I found myself genuinely smiling as I described my work. For 10 minutes, someone in my family's orbit actually listened to me. Amanda asked about my projects, and I told her about the Fortune 500 consultation. Her jaw dropped. She said her father worked in marketing and talked about Goldman like it was the holy grail of the industry. She couldn't believe I was not only working there but leading major projects. We were deep in conversation when Mom interrupted. She needed Amanda's help with something in the kitchen, giving me a look that said I was monopolizing the guest of honor's girlfriend. After Amanda left, I stood alone again. An aunt I barely knew approached, asking if I was still looking for a real career or if I was content with my little office job. The dismissal in her tone was identical to Mom's. I smiled politely and excused myself to the bathroom. Standing in front of the mirror, I looked at my reflection. I was wearing a $500 blazer, had a 6-figure salary, and was leading projects that would be case studies in business schools. Yet here, I was still worthless Maya, the disappointment. I decided to leave the party early. I found Mom in the kitchen and told her I had work the next day. She barely looked up from arranging appetizers. She said it was fine, that the important guests were here anyway. That comment should have hurt, but it just felt sad. I hugged Dad goodbye, waved to Ethan across the room, and left. As I drove away, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. These people didn't define me anymore. Their opinions couldn't touch the life I'd built. My phone rang as I pulled onto the highway. It was Claire. She apologized for calling on the weekend, but Mr. Goldman wanted to meet with me Monday morning. First thing. She wouldn't say why, but her voice sounded excited. I spent Sunday wondering what it could be. A new project? Feedback on my current work? Possibly a problem I'd need to fix? Monday morning, I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, prepared for anything. Mr. Goldman's office was on the top floor, with windows overlooking the entire city. I'd only been there twice before. His assistant offered me coffee, and I accepted, needing something to do with my nervous hands. When Mr. Goldman arrived, he was smiling. He sat across from me, not behind his massive desk, and asked how I was enjoying Goldman Enterprises. I told him honestly that it had changed my life. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then he told me why he'd called me in. The Fortune 500 client wanted to offer me a position. Head of Digital Strategy. Salary of $180,000, plus benefits and bonuses. They'd approached Goldman to ask permission to recruit me. Mr. Goldman said he'd told them no initially, because I was too valuable to lose. But then he'd thought about what was best for my career. This was an incredible opportunity. However, Goldman wanted to make a counteroffer. Mr. Goldman explained that Goldman Enterprises was expanding. They were opening a new division focused entirely on Fortune 500 clients and major corporations. They wanted someone young and innovative to lead it. Someone who understood both traditional and digital marketing. Someone who could build a team from the ground up. They wanted me. The position was Director of Enterprise Solutions. I'd have my own department, hire my own team, and report directly to the senior partners. The salary was $200,000, plus profit sharing and performance bonuses. At 23 years old, I'd be one of the youngest directors in the company's history. I sat there, stunned into silence. Two incredible offers in one meeting. Mr. Goldman smiled and told me to take a week to decide. But he hoped I'd stay with Goldman. They'd invested in me, believed in me, and wanted to continue growing together. I somehow managed to thank him professionally before floating back to my office. I took 3 days to decide, weighing both options carefully. The Fortune 500 position was prestigious and safe. But Goldman's offer was a chance to build something from scratch, to prove I could lead at the highest level. I chose Goldman. When I told Mr. Goldman, he actually hugged me. Within 2 weeks, I had an office, a budget, and permission to hire 3 junior associates. I spent a month building my team, interviewing candidates, and developing our strategy. My division's goal was ambitious: land 10 Fortune 500 clients in year 1. We landed 12. By the end of my first year as director, my division had generated $15 million in revenue. My personal compensation, with bonuses and profit sharing, exceeded $300,000. I was 24 years old, financially secure, and professionally respected. And my family still thought I worked a basic office job. I kept it that way intentionally. This success was mine, untainted by their opinions or expectations. 2 years after the graduation gift burning, Mom called with unusual news. A family friend had mentioned seeing my name in a business magazine article about young professionals transforming the marketing industry. Was that me? I confirmed it was. There was a long silence. Then she asked what exactly I did at my office job. I told her I was a director at Goldman Enterprises, running a division that worked with Fortune 500 companies. Another long silence. She asked how much I made. I'd never been good at lying, so I told her the truth. $300,000 last year. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Finally, she asked why I'd never told them. I reminded her about graduation, about the offer letter she'd burned, about being called worthless. I told her I'd decided that day to stop seeking approval from people who'd never give it. She tried to apologize, but the words came out hollow. She said she'd only burned it because she didn't want me to be disappointed if it didn't work out. Mom asked if we could have dinner, just the family, so she could properly congratulate me. I agreed, curious about how this would play out. The dinner was at a nice restaurant, Mom's treat. Ethan was there, now in his third year of medical school. He'd heard about my success from Mom and seemed genuinely happy for me, though I could see the surprise in his eyes that his little sister had outpaced him financially. Dad shook my hand and said he was proud. Mom tried her best to celebrate me, but I could see the discomfort in her eyes. Her worldview had been disrupted. The daughter she'd dismissed was now more successful than she'd ever imagined possible. She asked about my work, my apartment, my life. I answered politely but without the eagerness I'd once had for her attention. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Mom pulled me aside. She said she was sorry for burning the letter, for all the years of comparisons, for making me feel worthless. I looked at her, this woman who'd shaped so much of my pain, and realized I'd already forgiven her. Not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting. I told her I appreciated the apology. Then I got in my car and drove home to my beautiful apartment, to my successful career, to the life I'd built from ashes. Some fires destroy. But some fires forge steel. Mom had meant to burn away my dreams. Instead, she'd burned away my need for her approval. And in doing so, she'd set me free.